All right, here we go.
What's good, everybody? I'm Robert Dickens Jr.
This is Ryan Reed.
This is Elanders Frazier.
This is John Gaal, and you're listening to Volta.
Changing the conversation
For percussion educators,
designers,
and performers.
What's up, everybody?
Are we just playing Mad Gabs on this one? What kind of games can we play?
We're going to take a little break from our podcast to talk about percussion. We're going to play some games today about percussion. No, I'm kidding.
Liu Kang. So, and I saw a commercial. They were doing the special edition Mortal Kombat that just came out. It was 11, I think.
Yeah.
They got the original, the dude that played Shang Tsung in the 95 movie to do the voice.
Oh, yeah?
Something like that, yeah. He old, for sure. Because he was old when he made that movie.
Yeah.
In like 95. So here we are, 2025.
Yeah.
Dang! Somebody born in 95 is 25 years. John, what year were you born?
I'm older than that.
Dang, kids born in 95 is 25. That's wild.
Everybody old as shit now.
I know, man.
Edit that out.
Oh, I forgot sorry. I forgot that we're recording. My bad. Sorry, kids.
We're a PG channel. There'll be no F-bombs, at least not one on this PG podcast.
It's okay, guys. That's why we have producers and editors.
That's right. I gotta figure out how to censor. I gotta figure out a sound that I can use to bleep sounds, so we can just go in, and then I'll just hit the censor button.
That really would be cool, though. I think it could be someone's voice in general.
I
It could be
feel
John's
like
voice.
there's gotta be a way to do it.
Here we go.
Remember, we
Edit
just
that.
put the cut. You mother cutter.
Or it could be the last time. It could be anything like that. I think that would be hilarious because I would like to be a part of that. Also, I would not like to censor myself. I'm mad that my bitch got cut out of the first episode. Excuse me.
We can make this.
I had to go like crap. It was like snip. That's when you got to take the waveform. You got to wind it all the way out.
You got to wind it all the way out, bro.
So you get right there.
You got snip, bro. Snip it all the way out.
So, John, you been CrossFitting?
Yeah, man. I'm starting to do that again.
You sound like that was the most pitiful excitement of I'm a CrossFitter I've ever heard. Like, yeah, I'm starting to, it hurts.
Well, I just worked out, so I'm exhausted. And I just ate, so like all the food and blood's going to my stomach and digestive system. So if I just keep rolling.
You gotta hit that protein shake, bro, before you pass out. Go. You need what's that thing called? What's that, Bang?
No, I know you're talking about the energy drinks, right?
Yeah, man. You gotta get an energy drink so we can power out this audio / video.
We're doing it, man.
We've yet to say Volta on this channel, and I just want to say it out loud. We're Volta and proud.
Volta.
Maybe we should explain in more detail what Volta means.
I think so.
That's a good
so.
conversation to have.
Like 8 episodes in, why not?
Right?
No big deal. I mean, yeah.
So Volta is an Italian originated word. me.
Let's look it up.
Doing some. I mean, I want to make sure I get it right because it's nothing worse than explaining something and you're wrong. You know what I mean?
And somebody's Googling it during the episode. And it's
Right.
Like, that ain't what that
Like,
means.
that ain't what Volta means popcorn in Italian. And just like popcorn changes from kernels to that delicious. Like, I think he got it wrong. All right, so Volta definition. It has a literal meaning of turn or time used in music. The origin is about 1635, etc. One of the uses that we found was in literature or poetry, where it is a dramatic change in thought or emotion. And I think that kind of captures what we use it for, as a dramatic change in thought or emotion. And to be honest, you know, I don't think it necessarily negative. It can be positive. It can be negative if that's the way you. I'm Volta mad. But I think we're using it when we're talking about changing the conversation. We're talking about evolution, like evolving the conversation. Like, what more can we talk about that we haven't talked about? Especially, you know, in the percussion community, because things are constantly changing. I mean, you know, we talked about 1995 earlier, and how many things have changed from 1995 to 2020? Just like in that snapshot of time. That's 25 years. That's somebody's lifespan. But, you know, for people that have been doing it forever, you know, they've made some significant changes in that time, and even before that. Have you guys I sent y'all the links for those the podcast that Tom Monks was doing. Not podcast, it was like a Facebook Live kind of thing. What y'all
with
think
all the front ensembles, right?
Yeah, front ensemble, battery. What y'all think about those? Let's talk about those.
I watched it for like 2 or 5 minutes. Eric Johnson was talking about his history.
I
did
not know
bored.
Eric Johnson played snare drum for the Cavaliers.
Me either.
That's new information to me. It's pretty wild.
Yeah, he's been around. He's done a lot. Super respected in the Cavalier organization.
Rightfully
because
so.
He's played, but I meant just like how he's also elevated the keyboard writing and whatnot. It's really cool. I remember when I marched. What?
Change.
Volta. Change.
Evolution.
Change. But no, it was cool. I think it's when I marched, like he would come. Like he's a busy guy, so he only was able to give up like a day, 2, maybe 3 days max during move-ins.
Mm-hmm.
But we'd have the front ensemble set up either on the tennis courts, or if it was raining, we were in like a big gym. This was when we were at where was that? Benedictine University, before they upgraded to some other like really nice places after my time. But like he would sit in the chair in front of us, like all front ensemble techs. He'd have his music. Joe Roach would be there, or Alan, or whomever was running the pit at the time. And we would just play, and then he would walk up. He'd watch us play. He'd make some mallet changes. He'd talk to the instructor or the composer and be like, why are you doing this? Or let's try this. I also he did that at Mystique too. He would come in from time to time, and he and Matt would sit down, and we would just play stuff, and they would just experiment when they were trying to bring something more to the table, flesh it out a little bit more. So it was always nice, because he was never like a hard ass and like, you suck. But he also, he gave his opinion, and he was just like, he's really big into like energy. and are you bringing it every single rep? Like, was that your maximum effort? But he doesn't belittle you and how he asks that or how he says it. But he definitely, the way he says it, like, it's really like empowering. Or I felt empowered, and I knew the reps, like when he was there, we as an ensemble definitely gave it a lot more, both in Mystique and Cavaliers, and definitely improved a lot when he was around. So he's pretty cool.
Sounds like you have a lot of respect for him.
I do. Well, I also so my first year in Cavs in 2013, I was outside marimba, and Rick Drury is EJ's nephew. And so I got to know Rick, excuse me. I got to know Rick really well, became really good friends. And he was also my big. And so whenever EJ came around, I was always hanging out with Rick, and we were always hanging out with EJ. And especially when we went over to the Murfreesboro, Tennessee show, he and the whole family would come over and watch. And it was just always, he was always very friendly and open, and he always remembered my name. So I respected him for that. Like, someone big in authority would take time to, make a relationship with someone.
That's the experience that I got from him. I wouldn't say that I really got to know him that well in the 2 years that I was at Mystique, because of course in the Battery I didn't see him a lot. But after
you were getting yelled at by Shane.
this is true. I wasn't getting yelled at by Shane. But there were some people getting yelled at by Shane from time to time. It happens. I got more experience with him after I aged out when I was teaching. And he got me signed as an innovative percussion artist. And seeing him in the lot at like WGI championships every year, it started to be a thing that I, really built a close relationship with the company, because, I saw him, I saw Henry, I saw Nick at the time. So, between those guys, they really kind of cemented my concept of what it meant to be a educator artist, and the kind of support that you have from a company when you're kind of in that position with them. Because, it was never about, hey, I need all this free stuff from you guys, more so than just being able to talk to them about the products, what it, how they work for us, what they do for us. And then them just coming to see what we do as a group. Like, that was like one of the biggest things for me, is that they would just come and watch our parking lots and say, hey, if we can catch the show inside, we'll try to, but, we're going to be running the lots for a good stick of time. And you get to know them just by hanging out with them at the, at the lot, besides, calling them, etc. So that was always impressive to me. And, I know there's a whole lot of, artist, company relationship deals that go in and around our activity. But, that's one of those that I really cherish, not only because I've been with them for a decade now, but just because of that relationship that they bring as just people, and, the genuineness that they bring behind it. Not to say that there's not other people that are not genuine. Pull a John. That's not what I'm saying. But
you gotta be careful what you say in today's society, man.
This is true,
out.
man. This is true. I want to be very clear that there are a lot of people that do good stuff out there, and, Innovative is just one of them, to kind of brag on them a bit, so.
Rob, Ryan, how's your relationship? Because you guys are sponsored by IP as well, right?
Yep. I am new to IP. Whoop whoop. Yeah. So I've met only Henry, and that's kind of my connection thus far. Maybe not even a year, but I mean, it all seems like really tight knit, and everybody that I know that uses IP, they all enjoy it and they feel like it's a cool experience. I can agree and attest to that. so I can't speak for other groups, but I mean, I think it's cool. I like IP.
I've every time I'm at a show or at a lot that Henry's at, he always stops over, and it doesn't matter like what group I'm there with. He's always like one of the first people to come over and say hi when he's able to. He's running around to all the IP groups and whatnot. But I think my experience with him has always been very, very caring and very like they feel involved in the groups, even though it's just like, hey, we're using their sticks and mallets. They always feel like they're involved, in just the experience that the group has. I've been in situations where stuff is broken in the lot with my high school concert group, and they're offering to run back and grab stuff. And I met the West Coast rep at a lot for finals of one of my concert groups. I can't remember her name. It's Carol something. I don't know her name, but she's the West Coast rep. And she was like, Ryan, Rob and I have been talking, Rob Ferguson, who's also an IP artist and was writing for me at the time. We were talking and all the things that you do, you guys are stacked IP. Like we have multiple bags on everything and some of them are looking pretty beat and worn. She's like, just reach out. We're more than happy to help you any way we can, sending you new bags or whatever, and just, it's just because we spent the money to do them a solid that they're like, hey, we can help you out, and that hasn't been my experience everywhere, and I haven't had a ton of endorsements, but just super caring. I've never met Eric before, but I know he was in the lot for, again, if you've ever done the concert open thing, like when I first started doing it, concert A didn't exist. Concert open was the first class on, so we would unload literally at 6 a.m. One year we were unloading at 6 a.m. for prelims, and right before we were getting ready to do our finals run, and this guy walks over, and I don't know who he is at the time, and I'm not an IP artist at the time, and he walks over and he's again talking to Rob behind me, and we're getting ready to push over. And Rob came over and was like, that was Eric Johnson just coming out to check out your lot. And you guys are the first group that he's seen this WGI season, again, because it's like 7:30 a.m. But the fact that he came out just because we used IP, like I wasn't an artist at the time, we just bought the product, but he cared enough to come out. So my experience with him has been awesome.
Now I know the people listening, or hopefully either listening or watching this, some of them are probably IP artists. Some are probably, other artists, Promark, Vic Firth, whatnot. I am not affiliated with any group, so I can say whatever I want. No one's approached me. But let's move maybe the conversation that way. For those that maybe are interested in getting sponsorships, I know this is a big conversation that people have all the time. My mindset is, like, I haven't approached anyone because I kind of like a little bit from every group, and I'm kind of just doing my thing. Like if someone approaches me and is like, hey, we really like what you're doing, we'd like to help you out and sponsor you, I will say, yes, sir, yes, ma'am, I'll take all that. But I have limited experience in getting a sponsorship. So for someone who's listening now is maybe looking into that, or as sponsored reps yourself, what do you guys say, or what steps did you take to kind of initiate that conversation?
Well, for me, it was really kind of to Ryan's extent. I mean, we were using a product that we were just buying. There were no endorsements. I mean, I had known them through familiarity, through the organizations that I had been a part of, through Mystique, through Spirit. But, I got approached in a parking lot at a show, and, hey, send me an email. We'd love to talk about getting you on the roster as an education artist. Your group's doing very well. They do a lot of good things. We see, that you do a lot of good things, especially in the WGI realm. I mean, we were pretty rock solid my first 2 years when I was at Pace, winning a couple of regionals and stacking up to be finalists. So it really was that. I sent them my resume. including my college resumes, is that was one of the things that they wanted to see was my college resume, everything that I've been doing. And from there on out, it was, hey, you represent us and we will try to support you. And it's not one of those, I think the common misconception is when you sign an endorsement, it's like, you said sponsorship a little bit earlier, but with the endorsement, it's not like you get like what do they call those things, like where you get it sent in the mail and it's just a bunch of random stuff in a box. Like you don't get like a loot crate full of stuff from a company that says welcome to the team. I mean, a lot of the times you get I got a letter. It was in a giant manila envelope. I had to sign some stuff, and there are some applicable discounts that you get. But I think the biggest relationship piece is, feedback. They get to hear direct feedback from you because you use the products exclusively. You don't deal with any other companies, and they kind of get that feedback on how do you like the products that you're using for what you use them for. And I think they use that data to really continue the research and amping up the product, making it better. I know about products sometimes before they're going to release, just depending upon who I'm talking to at that moment. So it's, I find the beauty in the relationship knowing that I've got a direct line to the source that's making it. Because that's one of the things that you don't have when you're just going to a music store and purchasing and stuff like that. Like, you don't know what that company does, how they do things, who those people are behind those faces, are they reputable? Are they just nice people in general? Because like, that's a big thing for me. Like, I love working with people that I get along with. It's difficult to work with people sometimes that you can't get along with, or you don't have the same values or mindset. So to be able to speak personally with all of those cats, it really does breathe life into the relationship, because I know that we have similar mindsets when it comes to teaching. When we just talk about life sometimes, like it just depends on who I'm talking to, but it's nice to feel a part of an organization or be associated with a company that stands on good values, the same that you do. So that's one of the things that I really took away from it. And, I get some discounts here and there, and it's, but for me, even if I didn't get the discount, it's a great product. You know what I mean? So it's one of those things to me. It's like, when you find people that you want to be around, like, it's like, it doesn't matter if it takes me longer to get to your house, you're the person that I want to hang out with. So it's kind of the same thing. Like, even if I didn't get the discount, that's the product that I would want to use because I love the product. So
I definitely agree with that. For me, my story was this past BOA season. One of the high schools that I work with, Chattahoochee High School, took their first trip to BOA, and I believe it was after their prelims run or possibly semis. I know that Henry was sitting in the audience and was just watching groups and whatnot, and we used IP. And he sent me an email or a message on Facebook when I had Facebook that sorry, it's, I'm good on that. Anyway, unless Mark Zuckerberg want to send me that check, cut the check, I will come back to Facebook. However, yeah, he sent me a message on Facebook and was like, "Hey man, I just saw your group go on. Like, you guys sound good, blah blah blah. Like, I want to see if you want to check out our stuff at IP and anything that we can help you with." And obviously, already knowing Elanders was with IP, and other people that I know, Terry with IP. The list goes on and on of other people that have just always raved about IP. And we used IP when I marched at Glassman as well. I was already familiar with the products and really liked it and all that. And I thought that, okay, well, this is a really good opportunity, one, to be able to check out more of what they have. And then also make sure that I have the best relationship to make sure that I get the best products for my students. just because I don't believe in using a product that I don't personally use myself. Like I wouldn't allow my students to play with something that I don't have the utmost like trust in, like the quality of that product.
What about you, Ryan?
So my road to an endorsement was a little bit different because I've had a couple, and IP is the only stick endorsement I've had. And how that came about was kind of a long road. When I was marching Matrix and teaching Matrix, we've always been really good. We've always been really fortunate for all the reps to come around and like be introduced to everybody. So the members know who the reps are and are introduced young to the reps, and the staff is introduced to the reps. And I had been teaching Matrix probably 5 years by the time I got an IP endorsement. And it was a buddy of mine who I actually wrote my first DCA book with that was like, hey, Ryan, are you endorsed with anybody yet? And I was like, no, nobody's reached out or anything like that. And he's like, let me hit up Henry. So he hit up Henry, and Henry was like, yeah, he's just got to ask. So I sent an email to Henry saying, hey, so-and-so told me to reach out to you. I'm really interested in being an IP artist. And we got the paperwork rolling a little bit later that day. And that's kind of how that first endorsement went along. Now I will say, had I asked and not been teaching world class for a couple years, that probably would not have gone that same way. So, the fact that I had a resume allowed me to ask. But I think that's a lot of the misconception with getting an endorsement, is that people think everyone's just going to come up to you and approach you in the lot or after a show or whatever. And a lot of times that's not true. That hasn't been my case. My case was, a buddy of mine reached out to Henry. Henry told him to have me ask, and I asked and got the endorsement that way. And then the other endorsements that I've had were friends were the artist relations people in those companies. So they reached out to me and they're like, hey, we're trying to build our artist side of the brand. Do you want to be on? And again, I had been teaching Matrix for a couple of years at this point, but I had a drum and keyboard company that I signed on with. And then that person left. And then they went through a bunch of changeover, and then I signed over with another one, and same kind of deal. A bunch of changeover happened. They went a different direction. So I decided to go a different direction. And again, not in a bad way. We were super supportive, super professional of how everything left off. But I've always been a big, like Elanders was saying and Robert was saying, it's the people that really draw you to something. And the products are good regardless of where you are. Every product has pros and every product has cons. But like the forget the artist relations, just the people relations goes a really long way. And again, my experience is pretty limited in that, but it's always kind of guided me in all the decisions that I've made in terms of that kind of stuff, what I've pursued, what I haven't pursued. Because John, I'm just like you. I like a little bit of everything now, which is why I haven't pursued, a drum endorsement or a cymbal endorsement or
Right.
whatever.
I mean, like for me, like I've worked with so many different groups, each sponsored by a different company. And so I like a little bit from like every company I've worked with. Like with Big Firth, IP, Zildjian, Sabian, Pearl, Dynasty, let's see, Promark, and then you have the orchestral side of things. What was it? I think Dragonfly. They got Volta, Marimba One. I mean, there's tons of companies out there. So I think about what you just have to find the people that you kind of connect with, right? But here's a question. Here's a question for you guys. Now that you are endorsed or sponsored or whatever you guys want to say, these companies have so many artist relationships and whatnot. does the company still reach out to you personally, see how you're doing, or do you only see them really at lots and when you're asking stuff like do you ever feel like a number, or do you actually feel valued as a name?
I don't feel like a number at all. I mean, having the ability to speak to them through email, through cell phone, I mean, that's just the thing is like, they're not my manager, they're not my personal assistant, they're not my chef. Like, that's not the relationship. So it's not one of those things to where it's like, where are my sticks? And then like somebody shows up like, here's your sticks, like, like that's not the relationship. Like, I think about the relationship is kind of like, it's like going to your favorite store and seeing somebody that that works there. And, they always let you in on the lowdown, what's going on, what new things just came out, et cetera, et cetera. And to be honest, like, the relationship that you build with them is on a person-to-person level, even though it started in the store, if that makes sense. So you don't feel like, it. It's not to say that it can't turn into a, hey, we live in the same city, let's go kick it. As I don't think that that's not the case. Obviously you don't want to violate any kind of, laws or anything like that when it comes to that regard. But, it's one of those things to where, like I said, you go to the store, you kick it, and then when you're out, you're out. And that's pretty much it. So, I mean, like, I don't get to talk to them as often throughout the year because, we only do I order products maybe once or twice a year. As a personal artist, I don't go through a whole lot of stuff in my personal time because I'm not playing that much besides like on a pad or my drums and stuff. So I don't go through a lot, but then with the organizations that I work for, it just depends on who I'm working with, whether I'm consulting, if the school that I'm working for is endorsed as well. The other people that I'm working with is endorsed as well. So it really is, it just depends, but it never feels like it's a labored conversation when we get to championships. It's not like, hey, nice to see you again, and you get like a fake handshake. And I mean, it's just real low key, real cool, down to earth. Man, how's your group doing? Good, man. Remember back when we was doing it's kind of like that relationship. I hope I said it in the best way that I could say it for people that are listening. I got to get used to this.
Oh my God. Yeah. Well, to jump in though, I agree. I can say with either of the companies that I've ever been with, I've always felt like it was a cool family atmosphere. And it's always been a sense of camaraderie between me and the other instructors that also use that same particular brand, just because we have a lot of the same values.
I would tell you, just from taking multiple groups, like taking an independent world group and a concert open group to the same regional, like if those guys are there, they go see every innovative group as long as their schedule will allow them to. Like one year they literally just popped into our warm-up and just said, hey Ryan, we're going to watch a little bit of your warm-up, that kind of stuff. They watched a little bit and then had to bounce to go catch another group. And it's totally cool. But they made the effort to be there, and they made the effort to be around the kids regardless. And I mean, concert open the concert classes are literally the least watched and attended at WGI. But I mean, they still make the effort to be there, and yeah, it is pretty sad because there's some pretty incredible musicianship going on in those concert classes. But my experience has been those guys come to see everything.
Don't sleep on concert class.
Mm-hmm.
Agreed. Yeah,
Cool.
I would definitely say, especially since you're talking about concert class, that was probably the thing that blew me away the most when I went out to California to SCPA championships maybe a couple of years ago. Like that blew me away. Like the quality of those like concert groups was like, okay, this is like a whole nother level.
So were
agreed.
any of you guys at WGI? I think it was 2012. when Woodbridge won Concert
Oh.
World with a 99 like 0.8 or something.
And
like
they
that.
did an encore at every finals. Yes.
Dude, they were ridiculous. They were ridiculous.
This is a good segue, y'all. Time to change the conversation up a little bit here. So Rob sent me a text, and this is how it always starts. Either I send Rob a text or Rob sends me a text. Talking about the importance and value of mainstream percussion education as it relates to the other segments of percussion education. When you're talking about WGI, DCI, we can throw BOA in there for kicks and giggles if we want. But what is the importance? Am I getting this right, Rob? What's the importance of staying a part of the activity, especially when it relates to WGI and DCI, because a lot of it is driving the other segments of the activity, and then also to ensure that as an educator, percussion educator, if that's what you want to call yourself, or a drummer, whatever you want to call it, that you are holding not only yourself, but your peers and your students accountable for what they do in those activities and once they get back to their home schools.
That is a very loaded question.
Or was that a statement?
I mean, that's the question that could be generated from that is, do you think that being involved in those other segments, whether it's all competitive related, talking about DCI, WGI, BOA, is necessary if you choose to be considered a percussion educator?
I would say yes. However, I think people swing the pendulum. You're either all marching band activity or you're not all marching band activity. And I say this because I grew up on the East Coast, and my information, how I learned, was through indoor percussion, marching band, doing Mystique, Cavaliers, and whatnot. But once I moved out to Texas, and of course, Texas is its own entity, own state, own thing by itself. But once I went to TCU and got my master's, actually, no, let's even take that back. Senior year of high school. Okay, so my school, Forsyth Central High School, all the way, big into marching band, indoor. We were competitive, man. We were competitive.
Very much so. I'll give y'all credit for that. That's known.
Senior year of high school, I auditioned for the Atlanta Youth Wind Symphony, and I made it. I was the last chair.
Nice.
But after experiencing that just opened my eyes to everything else in percussion. And I say everything else, again, at that time period, I was just like, wow, look at the high caliber percussion can play in the symphonic setting, in the concert band setting. It was amazing. Like, we were playing, oh crap, now I gotta remember what pieces we were playing. In big Mislanka pieces, like Mislanka style composer, other crap, I'm blanking. But, important band people.
Great summary. Great summary.
I should have done some research before, but it's crap. Anyway,
the big deal pieces,
the big deal pieces. But what I'm saying is, like, as a high school senior who's always done indoor, always done marching band, actually being able to participate at a high level of symphonic playing, it blew my mind, and it was enjoyable, right? I mean, I wasn't part of the Atlanta Youth String Orchestra. I was just part of the Wind Symphony. Go up to college, and the college I attended, it's a very conservative college, and we didn't have a huge percussion ensemble, and again, marching band wasn't really a big thing. It was more into the band style of playing. So that kind of opened up some more doors for me. But really, going to Texas and Dr. West allowing me to study under him and the other instructors there and getting my master's really opened my eyes to everything else out in the world of percussion. I mean, there's steel band, which I don't know about you guys, but I love steel band. It's so much fun. There's steel band, there's percussion ensemble, huge, high quality, high caliber groups. There's, jazz with drum set playing. There's world percussion. I mean, there's so many different avenues of percussion that I feel that most people, if they haven't had those different snippets of experiences, they're either everything is marching band or you're doing all this other stuff that's not marching band. It can't be an either or. And I think if you're going to be a percussion educator, you have to have those either or conversations, those opportunities for your students to experience the marching band side of things. But then if they want to do indoor, that's cool, but maybe that's more for college level. Whereas for a high school student, maybe you should do a little bit more percussion ensemble, samba, steel, jazz. Now that I've experienced Texas, I don't feel everything needs to be marching band all the time. I feel like you're cutting yourself short by not having these other experiences. All right, let's discuss. Go.
Well,
Go ahead, E, if
Well,
you want to jump in.
I want to hear from Ryan first. Ryan's talking first.
okay, go ahead, Ryan.
Okay. So I will say that I am super fortunate now. Well, I should say in Ohio, it's kind of based on the culture of the program. Some programs, especially from a percussion side, they push the marching band and the concert band thing harder because that, especially for the percussionists, because that is more entertaining than what they're getting in their concert band class. But they don't have the capability of doing percussion ensemble, and some schools, like where I'm at right now, I do percussion ensemble during the school day and I do marching band after the school day, and we do our WGI concert group after the school day. So the kids are getting some concert band and some percussion ensemble and some master classes and marching band and all of that in their percussion curriculum. So I agree that the more experiences they can have is better for them as well-rounded players. And I would say the more that we can push our boundaries as teachers, we give them better information, because those people that are marching band all the time, and I'm not going to say there's anything wrong with that, but if you've never played with finesse, how do you get your kids to play with finesse? If you've never played like a pianissimo concert buzz roll, how can you get the kids to do that when the music is written for it when you got your one rack player playing concert snare drum parts? If all you've ever played is a velocity approach to keyboard, when you have something that is more ballad-esque in your marching band show, how do you get the kids to play ballad-esque when they're used to going chum 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 the whole time? How do you get them to play with touch and finesse in concert band when maybe you're not in the room because your stipends are for the after school activities? How do you get them to play with finesse? And now that band director is ticked off because they're playing their chorales the way they've been taught to play in marching band because they don't have any other information being given to them. I think we've got to explore both ends of the spectrum and everything in between. And, I am not a drum set player by any stretch of the imagination, but I know enough of how to make 4 on the floor sound decent to be able to get my rap kids to play a ride cymbal pattern in a marching band show, stylistically correct, and not just ping, 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 but they can go spang, spang-a-lang with the right intent behind it. And I think that has a lot to do with it, is that you have to understand what musical intent is, and it goes well beyond what's written on the page. And if you've never had to interpret something for yourself, it's much, or if you never interpreted something in a soloistic setting, it gets harder, you know, unless you're listening to just a bunch of different music, you know, and I don't think that's as common today. I think we listen to a lot. I think a lot of people listen to like the top 40s, you know, pop. So our diversity in what we're listening to, especially with younger generations, is not rich enough to make up for maybe only having one stream, whether it's just marching band or just concert band.
I definitely agree with that. I think the thing that comes to my mind when we're having this conversation is context, and making sure that our students understand that a lot of the technical things that we'll tell them are based on a particular context. It's just like, for instance, when I tell students like, well, you know, what determines the dynamics of music? You know, is a marching band forte the same as like a solo forte? Well, no, it's the context that you're playing it in. Like, what venue are you playing it in? Are you playing with a whole bunch of different people? Is it outside? Is it amplified? Is there electronics? Is there nothing? You know what I mean? All these things are contextual. And I feel like as an instructor and as an educator, I feel like we have an onus upon us to give our students as many contexts to understand the vehicle of music as possible. So in that regard, I don't feel like it's a good idea to be one or the other. So one of the things that I try to do with my students is, one, anytime that we're in class, I don't practice marching band stuff, period. Like, I just don't do it. Like, this is not, like, class time is class time to learn how to be a better percussionist, and again, put it in a symphonic / percussion ensemble context. Everything doesn't need to be in a marching band context. For instance, like, I have to tell some of my students, like, forte is not 12 inches. Like, that's a ballpark to get you to understand this is what forte is in a marching band context, so that we can start there. But every time I say to play forte, it doesn't mean play with full velocity at 12 inches. That may be the same thing, but maybe a little less velocity, a little less, you know what I mean? So to me, teaching our students to understand that everything that we're saying exists within a context helps them. I think the second thing is to understand that when it comes down to what students are engaged with, I think that as an instructor, and this is one of the things that I kind of have to give credit to my friend Lauren Teal, that was kind of the text that I sent to Elanders about the conversation that they were having on this particular podcast, was that we shouldn't be fighting against what students are interested in. Like, if kids like indoor and they're fired up about doing indoor, but you're afraid that the indoor activity is only teaching them, you know, this particular skill set, then as an educator, you have the opportunity to design something that gives them the skills that they need while still using the vehicle and the motivation that they have to do that particular activity. You know what I mean? Like, I don't think that every kid should be an indoor drumline kid. I don't think every kid should be percussion ensemble only. You know what I mean? Like, there are a lot of different ways that we can communicate the same thing, but I think that it's smart for us as educators to be involved in the conversation, you know, from DCI to WGI or whatever, and use those things to our advantage to use the motivation that the students have in the best way possible, to, you know, rather than trying to make it a situation where we're like at odds. Like, indoor drumline is not at odds with percussion ensemble. You know, percussion ensemble and marching band is not at odds with concert band. Like, it's all music. You know what I mean? And I think that the more we help our students understand that it's all music, it's just different contexts, then eventually they'll start to make those contextual decisions on their own, that like, hey, this is too harsh of a mallet choice for this particular setting and this venue. That doesn't sound the way that it needs to sound. You know what I mean? Rather than saying, this is the mallet that you always use whenever you're doing X, Y, and Z. You know, we're trying to get them to make their own musical choices. So I think anything that helps them to be better musicians and helps them to be in more context so that they can make musical, intelligent decisions on their own is a good thing, in my opinion.
Nice. Good. And Leanders has nothing to say on the matter. All right, next topic. All right, E, your turn. Let's hear what you got.
I mean, I agree. I don't think there's anything else I need to add to what those two fine gentlemen just said. To speak from my experience, don't shun people that enter through the marching realm, because I think that happens quite a bit. It happened to me, to where when I got to trying to focus more in the concert realm, it's, hey, you're a marching guy, you'll never get it, or you just beat drums, like very demeaning. So you turn people off from the conversation about trying to get more education and wanting to learn more about different things if somebody's telling you that you'll only just be this. I've seen band directors do it to where they've told my students that, I could teach a monkey to do what you do. You're not a real musician. Like, that's a very pointed thing to say to a kid that's still growing and still trying to figure out what music means to them, especially in that sensitive age of high school where they're being hit with so many different things that they could do. And by that comment alone, you could turn a kid that might want to end up majoring in music to not want to do that by that one experience. So you've got to be very careful about the conversations that you have with your students, especially through that age and as they're getting into college, because I will say that I got a lot of negativity coming into college my freshman year, and it turned me away from becoming a music major. And that's my story. And it's sad because I work with a lot of people that have majored in it. I was not one of them. And it was directly connected to the experiences I had as a freshman in college sitting in music theory, where I was kind of picked on, chastised a little bit, and the professor just had a very demeaning way of trying to express information to me and made me feel really stupid. So stupid to the point to where I was like, I can't do this. You're right. And I didn't look back. I went into something else. Connected to the point that they put me in a music fundamentals class thinking that that was going to help when that wasn't what I was missing. I didn't need music fundamentals. I played saxophone for 7 years, and I was a percussionist at that point for about 5. Music fundamentals and what keys were on a staff and how to count rhythms was not what I needed. I needed somebody to help me with music theory, which is what my professor should have been doing, but he was very focused on everybody else that just had a little bit more knowledge than me. He didn't have the time to spend with me to help. And that was my sad story. So, I say this on a platform to tell educators, if you've got a student, especially a student like me that's not afraid of hard work, I never shied away from hard work, but don't back them into a corner to make them feel that they're worthless and that they won't figure it out. Because at that point, you're going to find them to focus on something else that someone will put energy and time into them to make them better at. They'll meet them the halfway that you're supposed to as an educator. You're supposed to meet your students halfway. You don't drop them off in the room and tell them, get better. You meet them halfway and you push them to get better, and they push back. And it's that continuing struggle that makes both of you better, you the educator, them as the student, but you also learn from the student by way of the education that you bring. And I can't say that enough because I've seen it. I experienced it firsthand, and then I worked with people that did it. And I was so disgusted by it. Like, how could you do that to somebody? How could you make somebody feel less because of the experiences that they don't have yet? They still want to get those experiences. But by what you're doing right now, you're making them not want to be anywhere near it at all. And that's your fault. So we've got to be very clear about the message that we send our students to let them know, hey, it is going to be work on your end if you want to continue to learn, continue to grow, and expand your knowledge base in this giant world that we call percussion. So much stuff to learn, right? I'm going to be honest and say I don't know everything that there is to know. I know a lot about a lot, but I don't know everything. And I don't know a person that can say that they know everything. But I also had a lot of great educators that spent the time and told me, hey, if you're looking to find something on this, you can find this resource here. Let me know if you have any questions about it. I've had friends that have done the same, that have been willing to say, hey, I see you working on your 4 mallets there. Make this adjustment, do this here, and keep working on that, and you'll get better at it. But to back somebody into a corner and make them feel kind of worthless for what they do know, as opposed to giving them encouragement and maybe giving them some resources and stuff that they can get to know, that's not how education needs to work. We've got to get those educators out and get people in that actually want to educate others. And my definition of education has always been share information. If you don't want to share information and you're not willing and open and ready to do that, then you don't need to call yourself an educator, and you need to go ahead and step. It's real honest.
Yeah, I'm going to tag off that real quick because I had the same experience in my freshman music theory class. It was taught by a grad assistant that just could not relate to being a percussionist, could not relate to having never sung before, and just, never wasted a moment to let me know that he thought I was dumb. And luckily there was a graduate assistant in the theory department that was a percussionist that I sought help from and was able to get caught up and get, not even get caught up, just get things explained to me in a way that I understood. But I think also as percussionists, like, I was in a job interview. So I have a music ed degree. I was in a job interview to be a band director. And they pointedly asked me a question. They're like, so as a percussionist, do you think you can run a band?
Oh
What?
my gosh.
Like, I got the same degree that everybody else did.
Right.
And luckily I had a lot of I worked with a lot of people that had music ed degrees before I graduated with mine and went through music education programs. So I could sit there and explain that, like, yeah, just because I don't have a level of mastery of a wind instrument, of playing a wind instrument, doesn't mean I don't understand the fundamentals of how something is played. I don't understand the fundamentals of musicianship. Like, I have those things, and I can play really well on my instrument, which means I can get people to play really well on their instrument. I just might not have, like, I don't know what finger to put down on something. But you know what book does? Their Essential Elements book they get when they first rent their instrument has all the fingerings. So just like band directors that are not percussionists tell their students to go look up the fingerings, I can do that too. And then, yes, I can relate air to energy and velocity of a hand, So we've got to put ourselves in situations where we can, defend ourselves against those questions, because it's like not a fair question, but unfortunately it's
All too
what
common.
I've heard, it's common.
Yeah, all too common. And it's heartbreaking, man. Like, I'm holding back the emotion hearing what you have to say, because it's sad that there is still this kind of undercurrent of belief that if you're a percussion major, or you went through your mastery in percussion, that you can't possibly gain a level of understanding and knowledge to do more than that. What? Do you know how many instruments I had to learn to become a master?
Let's talk about that. Let's talk about
What?
that. And
What?
that's something that sadly it never comes up in conversation in most instances, that percussion students are asked to master a range of skill sets on a family of instruments. You know what I mean? Whereas other students, they have this one instrument that they're trying to figure out. So why is that seen as less than? I think it speaks to, in my opinion, it speaks to the ignorance with regards to percussion that is over the entirety of music education in general. that percussion is, you can just switch to drums, or you can just switch to this, or you can just switch to that. Like, that's just so much easier
Oh, they can
than
just
anything
go.
else that's going. And it's like, okay, that's I don't know. I feel like that's something that happens a lot, and I think that it's unfortunate that there are a lot of band directors that kind of push that ideology off on their students. And your percussion students pick up on that. They pick up on the fact that you don't think of them as musicians. They pick up on the fact that you don't really that you're not valuing them the same as, you know, any other instrumentalist in your band. So I think that's something that's really important to think about as educators, which is the reason why we're there. I feel like as percussion educators is to show them the value of that, because that's not always heralded, you know, within the larger scope of music education.
I'll be the guy that says I've had the opposite experience than y'all. There are some good people out there. It's not all doom and gloom. I know a lot of people who have specifically have looked for a percussion person to be the next headband director, or at least the assistant, not even like the percussion director, but just the next guy, because of how many instruments, or girl, put that in there as well, or girl, because of the amount of work percussionists have to do, how organized and disciplined that many percussion instructors and players are. At least in my experience, I know fine art directors really appreciate hiring people with a percussion background as a head band director or whatnot, because they know that they can run a efficient rehearsal. They know how to maximize time and everything, and be organized and run logistics well. Not saying I totally agree, because I have also heard many experiences what you guys have said. But I think percussion is being great, because you do learn a lot of great skill sets of different instruments, which does suck because you have to learn so many. But it does teach you, I think, important skills of organization and whatnot that you can bring to the table and show off in an interview. What else?
I agree with that.
What else? Let's see. Yeah, I know money's an issue. Money's always an issue. But if your band program can have a head band director, an assistant, and at least a percussion director, so that during concert band season, the percussion director, and if you have the facilities. Okay, in an ideal situation, you have an amazing admin who will give you the facilities to rehearse. And during concert season, you have an amazing director in which you, the percussion director, can take away your kids to a separate room so that kids are not sitting in the back, and that you can maximize rehearsal and practice and focus on whatever you have to. I don't know where that came from, but I just wanted to put that in there. I'm getting tired.
Oh, wow. I mean, I 100% agree with that. I just think that, man, I will say this. On the other side of that, there are a lot of band directors that I have run into that do have a value for that. Shout out to y'all. Shout out to the band directors that actually want to have a percussion person there. Shout out to the band directors that don't want your students to be in the back of your band class all the time, and that you will figure out how to hire someone so that they can take your kids out, and that they can make those kids better and actually have a percussion ensemble and build those students' skills. Because the other thing that we haven't dealt with here as well is the majority of the band grades of music, you know, there's not a lot of percussion parts. And secondly, there are not a lot of percussion parts that actually are challenging, where the students aren't just doubling some other part or playing something that's an accompanying part. So to me, I feel like the other thing that seems to be the case, and I feel like is becoming more common, is that band directors are having to start to think about bringing other people into the percussion conversation, just because there's a hunger for kids to do more as percussionists now because of social media, because of YouTube and what these kids are able to see. Those students aren't as happy to sit in the back of the room and not do anything anymore, because they see so many other opportunities and they see students doing so much more, and they see percussion in such a big, so much more of a bigger scope than it has been in the past.
That's why percussion ensemble is important. Just wanted to throw that in there again.
I think it's all important, and I think it's about, if you're the kind of person that wants your students to have that exposure, you're going to find a way to get them that exposure to everything. Whether it's, I've asked the band director, hey, for the symphonic pieces, what kind of literature is the percussion playing? Can you find pieces that have greater percussion, advocacy? I did it in college. I did it for the schools that I taught with, like, you don't have to pick a piece where the composer just skimped on the percussion stuff. You can pick pieces that value every instrument in the ensemble. You know what I mean? Like, you can have those conversations if you want your students to have the kind of experience that is going to be well-rounded, that's going to prepare them for whatever is coming ahead of them. But, you've got to ensure that as an educator, you are also educating yourself in what to ask for, so that, you can have those conversations, so I don't get upset because I didn't go that route. I get upset because no matter how many conversations I have with people about it, they don't change. And that's what gets upsetting, is when you see those some directors, I can't say a lot of them, but you see some directors that are just so set in their ways, they don't know how to functionally make those changes that ultimately is going to benefit their program all the way around. If you have stellar percussion students, don't you think that you would be at a less stress level than you would if you had non-stellar percussion students? Like, why would you want a stellar wind ensemble and the bottom of the barrel when it comes to percussion? That doesn't make a lot of sense, does it? But we see a lot of energy doesn't go into everything unless you have the right person in charge of that ensemble saying everybody's important, everybody deserves, a seat at the table with the same amount of helping, right? If they're getting, and even if you don't have, and this is my thing, right? Even if you don't have the money to hire an outside director, that's when you got to step up your game and get knowledgeable and put them in a classroom and run the class yourself. I taught with a woman. Her name was Amanda Letty. She was a assistant band director for a while and became a vice principal after that. I knew she was going to be running schools just by the way that she functioned, right? Because if I couldn't be in class, she was there running percussion ensemble, running their pass offs, running every single thing that they needed to do. And I worked for her, right? Like, I was her employee, but she was like, they ain't gonna go a day without this knowledge, not on my watch. And the kids got to a point to where they were almost glad sometimes to see me, because they knew she was gonna have them, in a line, doing pass offs or, down the lines on scales, minor, like, because of how we had the program set up, you had to do everything. You had to learn everything. You had to not only do timpani and concert snare, you had to learn your major and minor scales. You had to be responsible for the circle of fifths. Like, you were not getting out of this program without a certain level of knowledge, because you ain't going to embarrass me when you walk into that college audition. You're going to know something. Even if you just going to be in the marching band, you're going to know something more than just eight on a hand at 12 or 15 inches, right? But it's all about making sure that you've got the same people working towards the same goals. And I didn't have that issue where we were fighting to where it's like, yo, I need them to, no, I had support in my corner, you know, all the way through. And that's what I'm saying. Like, if you're one of those band directors where you don't have the funding, the school's not going to provide it, step your game up, knowledge yourself so that you can knowledge those kids. And those kids are going to love you even more for it. They're going to appreciate you for it. And those kids will remember you when they get in the situation and they say, you know what, my band director, they never gave up on me. They never turned me to the back of the classroom and just told me to shut up and sit quiet. They made sure that I had all the information that I needed and more, because they knew it was important for me to continue to move forward in what I wanted to do. Do that.
Mic drop.
Sorry, I'm done now. I'm coming back down. But I hit the top of the atmosphere, and I'm floating my way back down now. So
Rant complete.
Rant complete, y'all. Hey, so
Well, I have a question for you
Yeah,
guys.
Ryan?
I have a question for you guys. So since we've been talking a little bit about like the marching side of things and the concert side of things, how do you guys, okay, so let me explain the experience I've had for a couple years now at one school specifically, but kind of most of the schools I've been at. So the kids
What school? Which
the
school?
kids take marching band. The percussion students take marching band really seriously. And, you know, obviously that takes up the first quarter of the school year, that kind of stuff. So we're focused on that. You know, we're not doing a ton of music reading at that time, because once you have it learned and memorized, you're focused on being clean and drill and all that stuff. So you like watch your students achieve in marching band at a really high level. And then when you go to concert band, I will never forget, I was standing in the back of the room listening to the kids play some concert band music, and not sight reading their concert band music, but a student of mine who crushed it for me on bass drum in marching band, struggling to play concert bass drum part on like a grade 3 concert band piece. And it blew my mind. So like, what are some of the things that you guys have done? Because now I'm realizing, now that I have time to pull the students out every day of the week, or most days of the week, I find myself doing a lot of skills stuff. But even then, teaching scales, you know, is a lot of times you're explaining to them what the pattern is so they can focus on playing the scales right. And, you know, I'm fortunate where my students know all their major scales, all their natural minor scales now. But again, you still put music in front of them and they're like, So what are some things, like, obviously besides
just got to sight
reading,
read more.
But, well, yeah.
I think it's a combination of things. You know, when I was running a program, we put forth we put forth the portfolio, and I took that straight from, you know, my idea of how college. I mean, coming out of college, and I was in college for a long time. I'm not bragging about it because it's not something to be proud of. I did 8 years without coming out of a residency as a doctor. No Dr. Frazier here.
Oh, wow.
So, I changed majors a lot, and, you know, that's part of my personality, but, you know, I changed majors 6 times. So that's why it took me a bit to find my way.
Oh, man, non-committed.
Yeah. Yeah. So, but we took the portfolio approach. So we handed out the portfolio right like at the tail end of marching season. And the portfolio carried them to Christmas break and all the way to May. So they had 2 checkpoints. Half of the portfolio was due before Christmas break. The other half was due in May. And the portfolio laid out everything that they had to achieve, which scales, rudiments, sight reading, music history, which is researching, you know, a piece and writing about it. Like, we wanted to make sure that their grade reflected the amount of work that they put in. So how we structured the portfolio was you had a base level that would get you, this will get you 100. If you do above and beyond, taking it past basic, intermediate, advanced, then you got additional points. And how you structured it was if you could excel further, like everybody had a minimum that they had to do, but if you could excel further in one section versus the other, like maybe you're a better sight reader than you are at doing scales at a certain tempo, then we let them flex that credit to make sure that they could get that grade all the way to where they wanted it to be, because everybody's different. You know what I'm saying? Like, everybody's not going to read at the same level, but everyone's going to have the same requirement from a base level standpoint, because you're not getting out of this class without doing it. You know what I mean? So I found that by doing that, A, I put them in charge of their own grades. B, I made sure that they had a base level of knowledge that everybody was required to have, regardless of where they were, from freshman all the way to senior. And then that even created many challenges inside of the students, because you had freshmen saying, I can do more than that senior can do on their portfolio. Watch me. And then we started using how they did in that, and then their scores when they did the all-county band to determine their chair placement when we assigned ensembles from symphonic to concert band to varsity band. So when I put that power into their hands to say, look, whoever reaches the farthest is going to go the farthest. If you decide you're just going to lay back in the cut, then you're going to watch your grades suck. Not right. But giving them
Make sure you write that down. Send that to me.
I know, right? But giving them that power, you started to see the kids that, it's the same kid that wants to drum on a drum pad all day long. That same kid takes that competitive energy to learning those scales, because they know at base level, they got to know these. But if they know a couple more and they know more than their friend, it's bragging rights. Look, I passed off 2 more than you did, Jake. Oh, snap. You better go practice, So you see them practicing on their own in the lunch period, et cetera, because they want to do better than the next person. Everybody knows the requirements. Everybody knows what will get you extra. So it's like, I want to be the person that's got everything. Like, I want every single checkbox done. I had those students. And then I had students that they could only do the bare minimum, and they needed help to get to the bare minimum. That's okay. That's where they were. But at least we established that for everybody.
Was your bare minimum passing, or did you say it was 100?
I don't remember exactly what it was, because we weighted the scores differently depending upon what they did. Like the essay had more of a weight than like rudiment pass-offs, and scale pass-offs had more of a weight because of the complexity of what it is that they're actually doing. So everybody had to do the same thing, but it turned into different weights. So it wasn't like perfect, but no, if you passed everything off, you didn't get 100. Like if you passed everything off, that's like passing. Like you got a,
70.
80. I don't remember what it was like, but it wasn't like 100 if you got just the bare minimum done, so you had to do more in something to push that grade all the way up, because it's just like everything else, man. Like if you score a 70 on every test in science, guess what your average is? A 70, but if you do chemistry with perfect significant figures, then you score 103s. And your 103s start adding up to higher grades if you get an 80 on a test. So we wanted to make sure that there was a range that they could get in each section so that they could continue to grow in what they were doing.
That's awesome. I like
That
that.
sounds like a lot of work. I don't know if a lot of band people want to work that hard. Like band directors want to set that up.
Well, the band director didn't set that up.
But you did. You were the percussion
the percussion director set it up.
That's what I mean. Like, I don't know if, I think that's a great model, and I'm going to steal a little bit of that. But if you're going to be a music educator, if you're listening and you're trying to figure out if you want to be a music educator, it's a lot of work. Just want to let you know, especially as a percussion director, not only do you have to be in charge of your high school, but you have to be in charge of your middle school feeder programs. That's why percussion directors also need assistant directors with them.
And we talked about that in our
Yeah,
previous podcast, right? Like if you're going to be a teacher and you're going to expect your students to be at a certain level, then you have to be at a certain level, meaning that you should be teaching at 100% if you expect your students to be at 100%. Don't be a average teacher expecting to get above average quality out of your students. You know, if you want above average students, then you should probably be working at Superman level. You know what I mean? To get a consistent level of above average students. And that's the end of the conversation. You should always be at a level of work that is indicative of what you expect in return. Sowing your seeds. That's planting 101. You're not going to get as much grass on the ground if you don't plant enough seeds, but you've got to plant twice as many seeds to get a minimum set of grass grown in the ground.
I agree with that. I think one of the things that I'll say that I have struggled with, specifically going back to Ron's question, is there have been a lot of instances where I've been less than enthused with the concert music that my students are playing, and they can tell that I'm less than enthused with the music that they're playing. So there's a little bit of a divide from the marching aspect to the concert aspect. And maybe some of that has to do with the skill set of the winds, right? Because I mean, let's be honest, that determines the grade level of what we're going to play, because the percussion parts are usually an afterthought. But I do have to, like you said before, just trying to use the motivation factor of, you know, having my students to understand, hey, like, you have to play at a high level regardless of whatever it is that you're playing. You know what I mean? There have been gigs that I've played on where I hated that artist's music and I thought it was awful. But you know what? I still had to play them chords like I was waiting for the check to get cashed. So that's just real life. You know what I'm saying? You got to do whatever you got to do. And you got a reputation that you have to protect as a musician. And that's an opportunity for growth for them to understand that, hey, one, everything isn't marching band. You know what I mean? I think the other thing is to help them begin to understand the context of how some music can be a lot cooler than what they understand. I think within marching band, there's a lot more rah-rah of, you know, big loud points and this, that, and whatever. And obviously you got the other things that are external to that, like going to the football games and parades and all this other kind of stuff. But I think when students are able to listen to music that they relate to, but it takes them to something that they're unfamiliar with, I think when they listen to certain songs, they'll be able to tell that they actually like some of the elements that are there. Like, for instance, there are a lot of students that they've never done percussion ensemble before. It's kind of foreign to them. All they've done is indoor drumline. Well, that student might like, you know, a piece like The Highway by Daniel Montoya a little bit more than they like, you know, I don't know, something, you know, some Bach on Wood thing from Tap Space or something. You know what I mean? But that kid that's never done percussion ensemble before, like, that's at least something that, like, oh, like, I get this. This kind of sounds something similar to what I'm used to. But then when they get to, you know, some of those 12/8 sections or some of those sections that are a little bit more less, you know, rah-rah, like, it kind of takes them out a little bit further. You know what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. And I think that maybe as percussion educators, we have an opportunity to do that, to show them, especially with marching band, being that some of the music comes from so much symphonic stuff, like, allow them to listen to the original recording. And to be able to hear, like, yeah, you liked all this stuff that I wrote in there in this because it's marching band with all these cymbal hits and all this context, again, that we put it in with the electronics and all this other kind of stuff, the visuals. But this is the original context of it. And look at what we were able to gain from just the symphonic approach that was there through the music that we just added these things that made it feel like Friday night. You know what I mean? And I think that once they understand that, then they can understand and start to listen to music in a new way and say, okay, yeah, this is a symphonic piece, but there's a lot more in there than I'm probably giving it credit for if I can become a little bit more mature as a musician to listen past just what's on the page and what it is that I'm seeing right here. So
I think that's a really good point, because I think some of what we struggle with, with our students is obviously the grade level of a piece is not determined by the percussion parts. So there's a lot of like the upper level music is less demanding on the percussion side of things. The top symphonic band at the school I'm at played Molly on the Shore, which is a kick butt piece. And if you're a percussionist, it's overture to the quarter note, And again, I'm not taking anything away from the piece because it's an awesome piece of music. But as a percussionist, it's you don't need a ton of rehearsal time on it. So one of the things that I've kind of focused with my top students in that setting is they've got to, like Robert said, listen past what they're doing, like on a Sousa march with that band. That bass drummer needs to know that he's got to listen to the tuba player and shape his notes the exact same way the tuba player does. And that's something that, going back to an earlier conversation where if you're just, it's just the drum part, like he's just back there wailing away on that bass drum on those quarter notes with no way of adding musically to what's going on because he's just thumping back there, versus you got to teach him to listen to the tuba part, make that match, make sure that the xylophone part or the glockenspiel part in the center is matching what the flutes are doing, and that you've got the right mallet to match what the flutes are doing, and your kids got to stretch their ears to be able to make those decisions. So I think that is a lot of when you're talking about maturity of musicianship, teaching kids in those top ensembles to just listen way more to what's going on is a great thing, and then usually with your younger bands, you get some busier pieces because they know they have to. A lot of those composers that compose specifically for younger bands know that the percussion's probably got to have some stuff that develops versus what is right for the music, which is what your upper level pieces are. They're going to write what is right for the music, and your lower level pieces are going to do that sometimes, but a lot of times there's a reason it's called for the developing band on pieces.
You guys are so smart. I like talking to y'all. I just listen and learn. Oh, shucks.
Oh, shucks.
I don't have anything else. I mean, there's a lot we could talk about.
I'd say we got a pretty good conversation in tonight. We got at least a hour and 30 minutes. Yeah. Hour and 30 minutes in. So good times, y'all. Changing the conversation. So I'd like to thank our sponsors. Us. We don't have any sponsors just yet, but hey, if you're trying to sponsor us, we're open to talk. So that's it for this episode. I hope that anybody listening, you've enjoyed the community that we've brought. Please like, comment, share knowledge. That's what we want to do. That is the hope and goal of this podcast and subsequent showing of the videos.
You froze up. Did anyone else freeze up, or is it just
bro?
man.
You got
wow, and you just stunted my mojo, dog.
It was so funny. You were like, please like. This was you. You were like, please like, comment, subscribe.
I was just you, John.
Sorry, can we do that again?
No, take two. So yeah, so if you're listening, just the purpose and goal of this podcast is really to just get information out into the ethos, share it. If you subscribe to it, fantastic. If it's not your cup of tea, there are million other podcasts that you can listen to. But our hope and goal is that we said something worthwhile that is worth sharing, and that we get more people involved in the conversation. That's what we want. So you can email us at voltapercussion@gmail.com. You can reach us there. Any suggestions that you have, we'd love to hear from you. Just any thoughts that you had on what you've heard so far. So we're very delighted to be here, and it's a blessing to be in community with this brethren, because you don't find a lot of people that you work with a lot of the times that end up becoming your true friends, and this has been one of those situations. So it's very rare. So once again, thank you to everybody out in the world, and I guess that's it. Cue the music.
Next week.
Tune in next week. Cue the music.
Oh.